and they never saw their child alive again. Fell at the hands of two people who killed them in cold blood near a sugarcane field, shot them in the back of the head. And the journey of Lloyd LeBlanc, Ewell LeBlanc, begins. How can we continue to believe in this Christ, in this God, in the Good Shepherd, in the one who takes care of us and our children? And our child has been brutally taken from us. And he was our own son, and we are too old to have other children. And our family name dies with David. They are on one arm of this mystery, the Christ mystery that we are summoned into. I awakened first, by God's grace. For a long time I wasn't awake to the dimensions of the gospel that have been talked about this morning. I wasn't awake to people in prison. I wasn't awake to the 50% of our city in New Orleans that lives in poverty. I wasn't awake to the racism of what was happening to my black brothers and sisters. When I did research for Dead Men Walking, I found there were more complaints to the Justice Department about police brutality in New Orleans than any other city, because I lived in the suburbs and it could have been in Calcutta. I was not awake. And the first thing grace does is wakes us up to be awake. As Jesus said, blessed are your eyes that see what you see, the ears that hear what you hear, to be awake. And that's not just in the Christian message. The story is told of Buddha who's coming along, and people say to him, hey, are you a god? And the Buddha says, no, I'm not a god. Are you a prophet? No, I'm not a prophet. Who are you? I am one who is awake. We waken. We cannot force enlightenment. It happens. It's given to us as grace. And so we hang out with people like we do today in a community, waiting for the grace, waiting for the insight. But what we have to do is just keep putting ourselves there. Keep showing up, as Woody Allen says. 90% of the success of life is show up. Show up. Here we are. Sunday morning, here we are. So the way the awakening happened, and this is the first part of the story of Dead Man Walking, was just waking up to the gospel and to be on the side of the marginated, to be on the side of the people who didn't have a voice. I was blind and deaf to the cries of my African-American brothers and sisters who, when I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because my father was a successful lawyer, during the days of strict segregation, the only way I knew African-American people were as our servants. I didn't even know people personally as friends. I never went to school, church. And then waking, then I went to the St. Thomas Housing Projects, where I then was taught by my African-American brothers and sisters about the other America. When you don't have resources, and when you have racism against you, police and the schools and no health care. I felt it, and it changed me. Felt the suffering, and I saw the system of injustices. When you see the two things together, the first revelation of the heart of God in the Bible is in the Exodus story. And when Moses made his way to that burning bush, the voice, the first revelation that came forth from the bush was, I have heard the cry of my people. It took me a while to hear the cry, and I responded. And you know, it doesn't matter how old we are when we hear the cry. The important thing is that we respond when we hear him. We act. And it's while I was at St. Thomas that I got an invitation to write a man on death row. It was the early 80s. We had not executed anybody in Louisiana for over 20 years. I never dreamed I was going to be brought right into the heart of the fire. And 2 years later, I would accompany this man to the electric chair, and he would look at my face before the state of Louisiana killed him. The way God's grace works in us is like the locks of a ship. When a ship, there are different levels in the water, and the ship goes into the lock, the Water comes up under the ship, and then the ship moves to the next level. That's the way grace works in us. We're called, and we have the grace we need to go to that level, and then we move. So I wrote a letter to this man, Patrick Sonia. He wrote back. He had no one to visit him. How many times had I meditated, had I studied, had I learned about Matthew 25? I was hungry, you gave me to eat. I noticed the words, I was in prison and you came to me. I just thought they never applied to me. You know, we all our own little spin doctors with the scriptures, if you catch my drift. I mean, well, you know, I was in prison. You know, there's different ways of being in prison. Like, if you shy, you in prison. You know, you get a whole crowd of people. I don't know how to talk to those people. You like in prison. I never thought, prison? And Louisiana is one of the highest incarcerators in the world, as is Florida, all the deep South states. I visited him, and the grace kept flowing up under me till finally then I was called to be with him. Witnessed his execution, witnessed his killing by fire, and it changed my life forever. It's what leads me to stand before you today. It's why I wrote the book, as a way to bring people close to the reality, so that our hearts can be changed, so that we can be moved, so that we can then work to change a system where we have a society that enshrines, legitimizes, sacralizes torture and killing as a way of saying that will be redemptive for us in this society. We awaken, we join in community, we move, we act. I say it's the cross of Jesus stretches us, because at first I didn't know what to do with the victim's family. Patrick Sonia and his brother Eddie killed in cold blood 2 teenage kids. David LeBlanc, the parents of whom I mentioned in the beginning, and a young girl, Loretta Moore. I didn't know what to do. I was just getting into this, and I made a terrible mistake. I didn't do anything to reach out to the victims' families. And I met them at the worst possible time you could meet a victim's family, because it was at a public pardon board hearing, and the reason they were all there was to get their justice. They had been promised, you were going to get your justice. They killed your son, we're going to kill them. And you be there at that meeting to stare down those governors, appointees, that don't let them dare deprive you of your justice. And that's when I met them. And what was I doing at the pardon board hearing? I was there to ask them to spare the life of Patrick Sonia. Couldn't have been worse. And I met Grace. The board was furious at me. They'd lost their daughter. When does the nun appear? The nun only appears in their life to ask that one of the people who killed their sons not be executed. They were furious at me. They walked past me in silence, and I deserved their anger because I'd done it all wrong. And surprised by Grace, and we're going to end here with this man, Roy DeBlanc, who walks right up to me with his wife and says, Sister Helen, all this time you've been visiting with those 2 brothers, and you didn't want to come see us. Sister, you can't believe the pressure we're under about this death penalty. And I didn't know victims' families would be under the kind of pressure. I thought any victim's family, given the chance, they killed your son, we're going to offer you the death of the person who did it, that you want to see him suffer, you want to see him pay for what they did. It's in all of our hearts when we struggle with this issue. The great pain that has been put on other people. And there's a part of us that says, well, they deserve to die for what they did. And he took me into his heart and his journey. He's the hero of Dead Man Walking. I'm just the one who told the story. And I made some bad mistakes, but this man. And he said, Sister, when I went and prayed with him and got to know him, and he took me on his journey, and he was the first victim's family I ever met and taught me. The heart of what forgiveness is about is not first and foremost of lifting the burden of the one that hurt you. And the way he put it was, Sister, when I told you about the pressure on us about the death penalty, everybody was saying to me, Lloyd, you gotta be for the death penalty. hardly looked like you didn't love your boy. I mean, you've had the ultimate loss. You almost lost your wife, Yule, because she couldn't be without her boy. And you're not going to ask for the ultimate punishment. What's wrong with you? And he said, Sister, I had nobody to talk to, and you weren't there for me either. And he took me into his heart. And he said, with all those people saying that to me, I went, they're right. They're right. I wish I could pull the switch, and in my mind and in my heart, I killed both of the brothers over and over and over again. I pulled the switch. I wanted to see them have pain for the pain they caused us. And he said, I didn't like what was happening to me. I've always been a kind person. That's who I am. And I know how to fix things for people. You know, if I'm on a highway 2 o'clock in the morning, I see a car broke down, I'm going to stop and help you because it's who I am. And I was losing that. I was angry all the time. I'm snapping at Yule and my daughter Vicky. And he put his hand out like this and he said, then I said, they killed our son. But I'm not going to let them kill me. And he set his face to go down the road that Jesus had taught. To love your enemy, to pray for those who hurt you. He said, sister, people in this society think that forgiveness is weak. It's weak. Like you're condoning what they did. I'll forgive you, forgive and forget. He said, weak, condone it. David was only 17 when we lost him. Every time he has a birthday, we lose him all over again. We go through it all over again. Condone it. But he said, I'm not going to let him kill me. And what he was the first one who taught me what forgive means. Give before is not to let the love and integrity of his being get compromised by hatred so that he would lose his own life. Is that what Jesus meant? To love your enemy, to pray for those who persecute you. That the love that is in us, the motto of this church, love wins, that it will not tear us apart so that we lose our own lives and are compromised and then become hateful ourselves and always thinking of causing pain to others. That love does win with God's good grace. I have been tremendously blessed, but not only accompanying people on death row and seeing that people, every person is more than the worst thing they ever do in their life. Each of us is more. Our essence is always more. There's a transcendence in each of us because we are sons and daughters of God, that we are more than the worst thing we've ever done in our life, all of us. Is that not what the mercy of God is? That not what redemption and salvation and grace means? We sit here today because of God's grace that has brought us and blessed us and brought us together in this community that huddles together and that then extends the love out into the hurting community, starting with ourselves and how tremendously loved we are. Brought into being, not by accident, not by a fluke and moving of the particles of the universe, but by a loving Creator who calls us. Is that not a glorious mystery, worth coming together above and dwelling on? In the end, I was with Patrick too. I ended up traversing, going into both arms of the cross, which we do every day. There is the part in us that's the victim. There is the part in us that's the perpetrator. We are all of these things. But this man, Patrick, whom I wrote, and whom I visited, and as it came time for the time of his execution, he said, Sister, you can't be there at the end because it could scar you to see this. And I found it rising up inside me like the water in the locks of the ship where the water, the grace comes up. And I said to him, I said, Patrick, I don't know what it's going to do to me, but I know this. You are not going to die without seeing one loving face. This is not to make him a hero. He and his brother killed 2 innocent teenage kids, the outrage in which we feel. How can we not?